Kingston, at 38 years old, made a salary of $64,000 a year as a senior operator at the Spokane Riverside Park Water Reclamation Facility. He was a quiet, methodical black man whose deep brown skin seemed to absorb the fluorescent light of the control room where he spent his nights. His hands, calloused from years of maintaining pumps and checking gauges, were steady. They had to be. In his line of work, a moment of panic could affect the water for 300,000 people. He understood systems, cause and effect, the unyielding logic of flow and pressure. It was a reality that had stopped making sense in his own home on North Altamont Street, a modest $320,000 craftsman he'd bought with his inheritance 10 years before he ever met Eden. The devastating situation unfolded not with a bang, but with the crisp, dismissive snap of a $2,800 Rimowa suitcase closing. It was 5:15 a.m. on a cold Monday in October. Rain slicked the windows, blurring the street lights into hazy stars. Eden stood in the center of their bedroom, a vision in a $1,200 Burberry trench coat, her hair in intricate Fulani braids that had cost $450 and taken 7 hours. She looked like a woman stepping into a magazine, not out of a life they had supposedly built together. "I just don't understand why we couldn't discuss this," Kingston said, his voice low and even. He was leaning against the doorframe, wearing his standard work uniform, steel-toed Red Wing boots that cost $180, and a navy blue jumpsuit with his name stitched over the pocket. The contrast between them was a canyon. $14,000, Eden. That's our emergency fund. That's the new roof we need next year." Eden sighed, a sound of pure theatrical exasperation. She picked up her $3,500 Louis Vuitton carry-on. "Kingston, we've been over this. It's an experience. It's 2 weeks, Paris and Rome. I've always wanted to go. It's for my personal growth." "Our savings are for our growth," he countered, keeping his voice from rising. "For our future, not for a solo trip you decided on last Tuesday." She turned to face him, and her expression was one of cool, impenetrable certainty. It was the look that had been growing on her face for the past 2 years, a mask of superiority. "I've been contributing to that account too. And frankly, my contributions have been larger lately, thanks to my commissions." She was a real estate agent, a very good one, who had recently started closing deals on multi-million-dollar homes on the South Hill. The commissions were huge, but they were sporadic. His $64,000 was the bedrock, the constant flow that paid the bills month after month. "That doesn't make it your personal slush fund," he said. And then she delivered the line that echoed in the silent house long after the front door clicked shut, the line that severed the last thread. "Let me be perfectly clear," she said, her voice dropping to a cold, precise whisper. "You have no say in how I spend my time or my money. This is my life too. I will not be managed." She walked past him, the scent of her $340 Baccarat Rouge 540 perfume trailing in her wake, a fragrance he'd paid for as a birthday gift. He heard the front door open, the click of her heels on the porch, the sound of the Uber driver loading her expensive luggage into the trunk of a black Subaru. And then, silence. A profound, echoing silence that was louder than any argument they'd ever had. In that silence, Kingston felt the complex system of his marriage finally, irrevocably fail. The pressure had dropped to zero. The flow had stopped. He had no idea what was coming, but Eden had just made a critical mistake. Have you ever felt like your voice was completely ignored in a relationship you poured your heart into? It's a feeling of erasure that cuts deeper than any loud argument. Kingston was about to learn that the quietest actions often have the loudest consequences. The facade of their life had been expertly constructed, mostly by Eden. On the surface, they were a successful, modern black couple in Spokane. Their home, though modest, was always impeccably decorated. Eden had a flair for it. turning Kingston's sturdy, comfortable house into a showcase of what she called aspirational living. A single West Elm armchair in the living room cost $900. The set of 6 dining chairs around their simple oak table were $350 each from Crate and Barrel. The abstract art on the wall, which Kingston privately thought looked like a paint spill, was a $1,500 piece from a local gallery. He remembered the day they bought that art. It was a Saturday. He had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift and was looking forward to a quiet afternoon watching college football. He was in his favorite worn-out jeans, a $20 pair from Target, and a faded Howard University sweatshirt. Eden had met him at the door, already dressed. "We're going to the gallery opening on First Friday," she'd announced. "Change into your good slacks, the navy ones." "I'm exhausted, Eden," he'd said. "Can't we just relax?" "It's for networking, Kingston. My clients will be there. We need to present a certain image." So he'd put on the $150 slacks and the $90 dress shirt she'd picked out for him from Nordstrom. At the gallery, he stood awkwardly with a tiny plastic cup of cheap white wine, watching Eden glide through the crowd. She introduced him as, "My husband Kingston, he works for the city," with a tone that made it sound both respectable and utterly boring. She spent 20 minutes talking to a developer before walking over to a large canvas of chaotic blue and gray streaks. "This is it," she'd declared. "This will be perfect over the sideboard." He'd looked at the price tag. "Eden, it's $1,500. "It's an investment," she'd whispered, smiling brightly at a passing acquaintance. "It elevates the whole room. Don't worry, I'll handle it." She'd used her own credit card, a sleek American Express Platinum with a $695 annual fee, but he knew the bill would eventually be paid from their joint account, the same one his steady, reliable paycheck flowed into every 2 weeks. His money, the product of long nights ensuring the city's water was safe, was being transmuted into a paint spill on the wall. Their financial lives were a study in contrasts. He drove a 2012 Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, a car he maintained himself. She leased a brand new white BMW 3 Series, a $43,000 car with monthly payments of $680. He packed his lunch for work every day in a metal lunchbox his father had given him, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat, an apple, a bag of chips, a total cost of maybe $4. Eden's lunch was almost always a $22 salad from a bistro downtown, delivered via DoorDash, a charge that appeared on their credit card statement like a daily tax on her convenience. He remembered their 3rd anniversary. He had planned a weekend trip to Leavenworth, the Bavarian-style village in the mountains. He'd booked a cozy, rustic cabin for $250 a night, imagining them hiking, reading by the fire, reconnecting. When he told her about it, her face fell. "A cabin?" she'd said, her disappointment palpable. "Kingston, that's sweet. But I was thinking more along the lines of the Davenport Grand downtown. We could get a corner suite. It's only $550 a night. We could have champagne and room service," he had tried to explain. "But the cabin is about getting away, just us, no distractions." "The distraction is the point," she'd said. "It's about luxury. It's about feeling special." They ended up staying home, the silence between them thick with unspoken resentment. He canceled the cabin, losing the $100 deposit. The weekend was spent with her scrolling through Instagram, looking at influencers posting from 5-star hotels in Dubai, while he sat in his $900 West Elm armchair and felt a profound sense of loneliness. Her dreams were getting bigger, shinier, and more expensive, while his remained simple: a partner, a peaceful home, a secure future. He was beginning to realize that her vision of the future didn't have space for his Camry, his packed lunches, or his quiet contentment. It was a facade, and the cracks were starting to show. The escalating betrayals weren't just financial. They were 1,000 small cuts of disrespect, each one deepening the wound. The cruelty was often casual, delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, making him feel like he was overreacting if he ever dared to call it out. The outrage accumulated in him slowly, a reservoir building behind a dam. One evening, about 6 months before the Paris trip, he came home from a particularly difficult shift. A primary clarifier had malfunctioned, and he'd spent 3 hours in the muck and grime, manually clearing the blockage. He was bone-tired and smelled faintly of industrial chemicals. He walked into the kitchen to find Eden on a Zoom call in the adjoining dining room. She was laughing, holding a glass of $60 Chardonnay. She was in the middle of a virtual happy hour with her real estate colleagues. He gave her a small wave and headed for the stairs, intending to shower before he even thought about dinner. As he passed, he heard her say, "Oh, that's just Kingston. Don't mind him. He's been playing in the sewers all day." The laughter from her laptop screen was sharp and tinny. He stopped on the third step, his hand tightening on the railing. It wasn't just what she said, it was the tone, the dismissive, almost pitying way she presented him. As if he were a child who'd come in from making mud pies, not a man who managed a critical piece of city infrastructure. He felt a hot flush of shame and anger. After her call ended, he confronted her. He kept his voice steady. "Why would you say that, Eden? Playing in the sewers." She was wiping down the marble countertop, a $4,000 upgrade she'd insisted on last year. She didn't even look at him. "Oh, relax. It was a joke. They know what you do." "No, they don't," he said. "They know what you tell them. And you make it sound like I'm a garbage man." "There's nothing wrong with being a garbage man," she said, her voice laced with false sincerity. "You know that's not what I mean. You belittle my work. You belittle me." She finally turned to face him, her expression annoyed. "Kingston, you are so sensitive. It's a joke. My God. You need to lighten up. Not everyone wants to talk about sludge processing temperatures at cocktail hour." The conversation was over. She had dismissed his feelings as easily as she dismissed his job. The dam inside him held, but he could feel the pressure rising. The argument about the trip was the final, catastrophic breach. It started when he noticed the 14,284.19 charge from Exquisite Journeys LLC on their joint credit card statement. He had been balancing their budget on a Sunday afternoon, a ritual he performed every 2 weeks. The number leaped off the page. He felt his heart hammer against his ribs. He walked into the living room where Eden was scrolling through her phone. "Eden," he said, holding the tablet with the statement displayed. "What is this? This $14,000 charge?" She looked up, a flicker of something. Annoyance? Guilt? Crossing her face before it settled back into a mask of composure. "Oh, that's my trip I was going to tell you." "Your trip?" he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "What trip?" "To Europe," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Paris and Rome. 2 weeks. I leave a week from Monday." He stared at her, dumbfounded. "You booked a $14,000 trip without even talking to me? From our joint account?" "I booked it with my commission from the Perry Street house," she said defensively. "It was a $40,000 commission. I deserve to treat myself." "It all goes into the same pot, Eden. We have goals. We have a mortgage. Well, I have a mortgage. We have property taxes. We have a roof that needs replacing. That money was for the roof." This is where the argument turned ugly. "I am so tired of living this small life, Kingston," she spat, standing up. "I am tired of scrimping and saving for a roof. I make good money. I want to enjoy it. I want to see the world. I'm not going to spend my best years worrying about asphalt shingles. It's not about shingles. It's about partnership. It's about respect. You don't just drain our savings without a conversation. It's done, she said, her voice hard as stone. The tickets are non-refundable. The hotels are booked. I'm going. So that's it? You just make a decision that affects our entire financial future and I have no say? She stepped closer, her eyes flashing. You have no say in how I spend my time. You don't get to veto my life, Kingston. I am not one of your little employees at the plant that you can order around. I'm your wife, but I am my own person. A person who is supposed to be in a partnership, he said, his voice raw. Maybe I'm tired of this partnership, she shot back. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. She had finally said it. The truth that had been lurking beneath every expensive purchase and every dismissive comment. She saw him not as a partner, but as an obstacle, an anchor, holding her back from the shiny, luxurious life she felt she deserved. He looked at the woman he had married, a woman whose beauty now seemed cold and sharp, and he felt nothing but a profound, aching sense of loss. The dam didn't just crack, it crumbled into dust. And in the sudden, silent void that followed, a cold, clear resolution began to form. The discovery wasn't a single moment of finding a hidden letter or a suspicious text message. It was a slow, dawning horror that coalesced into crystalline certainty in the sterile, impersonal environment of the Spokane International Airport. On that rainy Monday morning, Kingston had insisted on driving Eden. It was a final act of a husband, a role he was playing for the last time. He wanted to see it through to the end. He wanted to watch the final scene of his marriage play out. He parked his 2012 Toyota Camry in the short-term parking garage, the $16 fee feeling like the price of admission to a funeral. He pulled her $2,800 Rimowa suitcase from the trunk while she touched up her lipstick in the passenger side mirror. Inside the terminal, the air was a chaotic mix of stale coffee, jet fuel, and human anxiety. Eden strode ahead, navigating the crowds with an effortless grace. Her $200 Louboutin boots clicking on the polished concrete floor. He followed, a ghost in her wake, the handle of her suitcase cold in his hand. At the security checkpoint, she turned to him. "Well, this is it," she said, her tone bright and dismissive. "You don't have to wait. I can manage from here." She wasn't asking him to stay. She was releasing him. "I'll wait," he said simply. He wanted to see the plane leave the ground. He needed that visual confirmation. She shrugged and gave him a quick, airless kiss on the cheek. It felt like dry paper. "Don't burn the house down while I'm gone," she joked, then turned and walked toward the TSA agent, holding her passport and first-class ticket. She didn't look back. He found a seat by the large plate glass windows overlooking the tarmac, a view of gray skies and wet asphalt. He sat there for 47 minutes, a solitary figure in a sea of travelers. He watched families laughing, business travelers typing furiously on laptops, couples holding hands. He felt utterly disconnected from all of it. He pulled out his phone and looked at their joint bank account. The balance, which had been a healthy $16,112 just 2 weeks ago, was now $2,198. He saw the travel agency charge, followed by a flurry of smaller related charges. $250 for travel insurance, $180 for a new passport photo and rush service, $800 for what was labeled travel wardrobe from Nordstrom. She had been planning this for weeks, quietly draining their resources for her grand escape. At 7:48 a.m., he saw her flight, Delta 438 to Paris Charles de Gaulle via Seattle, push back from the gate. The massive engines began to whine, a sound that vibrated through the floor and up into his chest. He watched the plane taxi onto the runway, a sleek white bird against the bruised purple of the morning sky. Rain began to fall harder, streaking down the glass in front of him, blurring the world outside. He felt a tear escape his own eye, hot and surprising, and he wiped it away with the back of his hand. It wasn't a tear of sadness for the loss of her, but of grief for the man he had been. The man who had tried so hard, for so long, to believe in a partnership that had only ever existed in his own mind. The plane accelerated down the runway, a thunderous roar that drowned out everything else. It lifted into the air, climbing steeply into the thick gray clouds. At 7:59 a.m., it vanished. The discovery was complete. It wasn't just that she had disrespected him or spent their money. It was that she had left without a single backward glance. She had untethered herself from their life, with the joyous, unburdened relief of someone escaping a prison. And as he sat there, in the profound silence left in the plane's wake, Kingston realized he had just been granted an unexpected freedom of his own. He stood up, his back straight, and walked out of the airport. He didn't look back either. The first call he made from the driver's seat of his Camry in the parking garage was not to his mother or his best friend. It was to Stephanie Adebayo, attorney at law. Her retainer, he knew, was $5,000. He had exactly $2,198 in their joint account. He transferred $2,100 of it to his personal checking account, leaving Eden with a symbolic $98. The rest would come from his private savings, a rainy day fund he had started when he first began to feel the chill of her indifference. The rain had finally come. For the next 14 days, Kingston moved through his life like a submarine gliding through deep water. Calm on the surface, a whirlwind of silent, purposeful activity below. The act of playing dumb was a performance of normalcy, a meticulous illusion maintained for a world that didn't need to know his life was being systematically dismantled and rebuilt. Each lie, each act of omission, was a scene in a play only he was directing. His first stop after leaving the airport was not home. It was the main office of Sterling Bank downtown at 9:02 a.m. He sat across from a bank manager, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, and explained that due to marital difficulties, he needed to freeze all activity on his joint accounts and move his direct deposit to a new, individual account. He showed her his driver's license and the original bank agreement. Because his name was listed first on the account, he had the authority to do it. The account will be frozen pending a legal separation agreement, he stated calmly, using the exact words his lawyer, Stephanie, had told him to use in their brief phone call. Patricia nodded, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes full of a quiet understanding. The process took 20 minutes. He walked out with a new debit card in his wallet and the knowledge that Eden's access to their shared finances was now severed. That afternoon, he went to work. His colleague, a jovial man named Marcus, slapped him on the back. "Hey, King, how's the bachelor life treating you? Eden off on her big European adventure?" The question was a test of his resolve. He could have shown the cracks, hinted at the truth. Instead, he gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, she is. Just dropped her off this morning. House is already too quiet." It was the perfect lie, laced with a kernel of truth. The house was quiet, but it was a blessed, peaceful quiet, not a lonely one. "Ah, you'll be fine," Marcus said, laughing. "A couple weeks of pizza for dinner and watching whatever you want on TV. You'll be begging her to come back." "You're probably right," Kingston said. He had no idea how wrong he was. The next day, Tuesday, he began the physical act of separation. He drove his Camry to a U-Haul store on Sprague Avenue and bought 50 moving boxes for $125. He spent the evening in a state of methodical archaeology, digging through the layers of his life. He packed his clothes, his books, his father's old tools, the framed photos of his parents. He left everything Eden had bought: the $900 armchair, the $1,500 painting, the $2,100 set of dining chairs. He was excising her taste, her influence from his material world. As he worked, he put on a Sam Cooke album. the soulful melodies a comforting balm in the echoing rooms. On Wednesday, Eden sent her first text from Paris. It was a photo of the Eiffel Tower at night, sparkling with light. The caption read, "It's even more beautiful than I imagined. Wish you were here." The winking emoji felt like a twist of the knife. He stared at the message, a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He was supposed to feel a pang of longing. Instead, he felt a surge of validation. He was not a part of her beautiful picture. He was the man she had left behind to worry about a roof. He typed back a simple, non-committal reply. "Looks amazing. Glad you're having a good time. Be safe." It was a perfect piece of misdirection. To her, it would read as the benign text of a dutiful, slightly boring husband. To him, it was a final, polite goodbye. The biggest act of deception came on Friday. He had a 2-year PM appointment at the Woodview Apartments in Spokane Valley, a sprawling but well-maintained complex. He met the property manager, a woman named Brenda, and toured a 1-bedroom unit on the 2nd floor. It was small, just 700 square feet with beige carpets and standard-issue appliances, but it was clean, it was quiet, and it had a small balcony that overlooked a grove of pine trees. The rent was $1,250 a month. As he stood on the balcony, breathing in the scent of pine and wet earth, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't realized was missing for years. This small, unpretentious space was more of a home than his beautifully decorated house had been. "I'll take it," he said to Brenda. He filled out the application, paid the $800 security deposit, and first month's rent with a cashier's check from his new private bank account. He signed the 1-year lease. The pen felt heavy in his hand, each stroke of his signature a definitive, irreversible action. As he handed the signed lease back to Brenda, his phone buzzed. It was another text from Eden, a picture of her smiling in front of the Louvre, holding a shopping bag from Chanel. "A little retail therapy," the text read. "You wouldn't believe the prices here." He looked at the picture of his smiling wife, then at the signed lease in his hand. He felt a strange sense of calm. She was buying a $6,000 handbag in Paris. He was securing a $1,250 a month apartment in Spokane Valley. They were not just in different cities, they were in different universes, and he had just signed the deed to his own. The strategic planning phase was a masterclass in quiet efficiency. Kingston approached the dissolution of his marriage with the same methodical precision he applied to monitoring the water treatment process. There were inputs, outputs, and a series of controlled steps to ensure a predictable, stable outcome. His lawyer's office on the 12th floor of a glass tower downtown became his new control room. Stephanie Adebayo was a sharp, no-nonsense black woman in her late 40s, with a reputation for being unshakable. Her office was minimalist and organized, with a stunning view of the Spokane River. She charged $200 an hour, a fact that would have given the old Kingston a panic attack. But the new Kingston saw it as an investment in his freedom. "Okay, Kingston," she said during their first in-person meeting on Tuesday, the day after Eden left. "Let's go over the assets. The house on Altamont Street. You purchased it before the marriage?" "Yes," Kingston confirmed. "In 2012. I married Eden in 2015. I used the inheritance from my father to buy it. Paid cash. The deed is solely in my name." He had brought the documents with him in a worn leather briefcase that had also been his dad's. Stephanie's eyebrows raised slightly. This was good news. "Excellent. That makes things much simpler. Washington is a community property state, but assets acquired before the marriage are considered separate property. She might try to argue that the home's increase in value during the marriage is community property, but since you paid the mortgage, oh wait, you paid cash. I paid the property taxes and the upkeep from the joint account we opened after we got married," Kingston clarified. "She will argue her commissions contributed to that." "And she'd be right," Stephanie said, nodding. so we'll need to account for that. We'll calculate the appreciation since 2015 and offer her a fair portion of that. It shows good faith and shuts down any claims of financial misconduct on your part." She scribbled notes on a yellow legal pad. "Now, the joint savings account. You said she withdrew over $14,000 for this trip?" $14,284.19, Kingston said, sliding the bank statement across the polished mahogany desk. "Plus another $1,000 or so in related expenses." Stephanie scanned the statement, her expression grim. "This is our leverage. Unilateral dissipation of community assets for non-community benefit. It's a huge misstep on her part. We will file a motion to have that amount deducted directly from her share of any settlement. Essentially, she already took a $14,000 advance on her portion of the community property. The plan they formulated was simple and swift. Step 1. Kingston would secure new housing and move his personal belongings. Step 2. They would file the divorce petition the day before she was scheduled to return, ensuring she would be served upon her arrival. Step 3. Kingston would immediately list the house for sale. "Why sell the house?" Kingston asked. It was the only part of the plan that gave him pause. It was his father's legacy. "Because it's the cleanest break," Stephanie explained, her tone gentle but firm. "As long as you're living there, she has a psychological and emotional claim to it. She'll drag this out for months, maybe years, trying to get the house. We sell it, we split the proceeds according to the law, and you are free. You can use your share of the equity to buy a new place, a place that has no memory of her attached to it. It's about moving forward, Kingston, not just legally, but emotionally." He nodded slowly, the logic clicking into place. She was right. The house was no longer a home. It was a museum of a failed marriage, filled with her expensive hollow artifacts. Over the next week, he compiled the evidence. He printed every bank statement from the last 3 years, highlighting Eden's extravagant purchases, the $1,200 shoes, the $2,400 dresses, the $400 dinners. He made copies of her credit card bills, with their constant stream of charges from high-end boutiques and spas. He documented the $680 monthly lease payment for her BMW, a car titled in both their names. He was building a case not out of spite, but out of necessity. He was creating a factual record of a partnership that had become a parasitic relationship. He felt like one of his own machines, coolly separating solids from liquids, truth from illusion. By the end of the first week, he had a 3-inch thick binder filled with financial documents. It was the story of his marriage, told in dollars and cents. And it was a story that was about to have a very abrupt ending. The strike was executed over 14 days of surreal, sun-drenched autumn weather in Spokane. While Eden was posting photos of herself sipping a $25 Aperol Spritz in a Roman piazza, Kingston was methodically erasing her from his life. His actions were coordinated, precise, and utterly silent. Day 1, Monday, 9:02 a.m. Kingston froze their joint bank account. 2 p.m. He signed the lease for the 1-bedroom apartment on East Main Avenue in Spokane Valley. The ink on the document was a stark, definitive black. That evening, he sat on the floor of his empty new living room, eating a $9 pizza from a box and feeling a profound sense of relief. The apartment was a blank slate. Day 2, Tuesday. He bought the moving boxes. The work of packing was cathartic. Each item he placed in a box, his worn copy of Invisible Man, his collection of jazz records, the heavy cast-iron skillet he'd inherited from his grandmother, was an act of reclamation. He was sorting his life from theirs. He discovered things he'd forgotten he owned, tucked away in closets to make room for Eden's ever-expanding wardrobe. Day 4, Thursday. The first of Eden's postcards arrived, a glossy image of the Colosseum. "Thinking of you? The history here is incredible, so inspiring." It was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Kingston and Eden Wallace. He placed it on the marble countertop she loved so much, a solitary artifact in a home that was rapidly becoming a shell. Day 6, Saturday. Kingston hired a local moving company, 2 men and a truck, for $2,200. He paid in cash from his private savings. For 4 hours, 2 polite, efficient men moved his life from the 1,800-square-foot house on North Altamont to the 700-square-foot apartment in the valley. When they were done, the house felt cavernous and alien. Her furniture, her art, her belongings remained, arranged like a stage set for a play whose star was never coming home. Day 8, the second Monday. Kingston met with a realtor Stephanie had recommended, a woman named Sarah Jenkins. She walked through the house, her face a mask of professional appraisal. "It's a beautiful home," she said. "Great bones. The staging is a little specific, but it will show well." She valued the house at $450,000 in the current market. Kingston had bought it for $180,000 12 years ago. The equity was substantial. He signed the listing agreement. The for sale sign would go up in the yard on Friday. Day 11th, Thursday. Kingston's lawyer, Stephanie Adebayo, filed the petition for dissolution of marriage with the Spokane County Superior Court. The filing fee was $314. The documents were ironclad, citing irreconcilable differences and referencing the unilateral dissipation of community assets. A process server was hired for $100, given instructions to be at the Spokane International Airport on Sunday evening. Day 14th, Sunday, the day of her return. Kingston spent the morning unpacking the last of his boxes. His small apartment felt full and right. His grandmother's skillet was on the stove. His jazz records were stacked next to a small $150 turntable he'd bought at Best Buy. At 6 p.m., he drove to the old house one last time. He walked through the silent rooms, a final inspection. Everything was clean, sterile. He left the divorce papers, a copy of the new bank statement showing the frozen account, and the business card for Stephanie Adebayo on the center of the kitchen island, right next to her postcard from the Coliseum. He placed his house key on top of the papers. Then he walked out, locking the door behind him with his copy of the key, which he then dropped into a nearby sewer grate. It was a symbolic act of finality. He got in his Camry and drove away. At 9:15 p.m., his phone rang. It was her. He let it go to voicemail. He was sitting on his new, inexpensive $400 Wayfair sofa, listening to John Coltrane. The music was a balm. The first voicemail arrived at 9:16 p.m. Her voice was confused, annoyed. "Kingston, my key isn't working. The deadbolt is thrown. Are you home? I'm exhausted. My flight was delayed. Call me back." He took a slow breath. He knew the deadbolt wasn't thrown. He had changed the locks that Friday. Second voicemail, 9:20 p.m. "Okay, this isn't funny. I'm standing on the porch. It's cold. Where are you? I'm looking in the window and it looks empty. Did we get robbed? Oh my God, call me. Now." Third voicemail, 9:25 p.m. Her voice was sharp with dawning horror. She must have found a way in through an unlocked back window. What the hell is going on? Where are all your things? Your clothes are gone. Your books. What is this? A rustling of paper. Divorce papers? Are you kidding me? You're divorcing me? After I took a 2-week trip? Fourth voicemail, 9:30 p.m. Pure, unrestrained fury. "You coward. You couldn't even do this to my face? You pack up and leave while I'm in another country? And what is this about freezing the bank account? My card was declined at the airport Starbucks. I had to use my last 20 euros. You will regret this, Kingston. You have no idea what you've just done." Fifth voicemail, 9:45 p.m. The anger was cracking, replaced by pleading. "Kingston, baby, please. This is a mistake. We can talk about this. I was stressed. I shouldn't have gone. I was wrong. Just call me, please. Let's just talk." Sixth voicemail, 10:15 p.m. The sound of sobbing. I'm all alone in this empty house. It's so cold. Where are you? Please. I don't understand. I love you. Don't do this to us. Please don't do this. He sat in the quiet of his new apartment, the mournful sound of Coltrane's saxophone filling the space. He felt a pang of something, not pity, but a deep, sorrowful ache for the marriage that had died long before she ever boarded that plane. He listened to her final voicemail, a minute of just weeping, and then he calmly blocked her number. The strike was over. The silence that followed was his victory. The consequences cascaded through Eden's life not like a tidal wave, but like a series of controlled demolitions, each one bringing a part of her carefully constructed world down into dust. Kingston didn't have to do anything more. The systems he had set in motion did the work for him. Each downfall was a direct and enumerated consequence of her own choices. First, there was the immediate financial shock. The joint account, with its frozen $98, was a brick wall. Her personal credit cards were nearly maxed out from the $14,000 trip. She had expected to pay them off with a transfer from the joint account upon her return. When she tried to pay for a taxi from the empty house to a hotel, her American Express Platinum was declined. She had to call a friend from her real estate firm, a woman she considered a rival, and ask for a ride, a humiliation that stung her pride more than any legal document. Second, the house. The for sale sign appeared in the front yard the next morning, a bright red beacon of her displacement. Neighbors she had once charmed with glasses of Chardonnay at block parties now stared at her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. She received a certified letter from Sarah Jenkins, the realtor, formally notifying her that the property, legally owned by Kingston Wallace, was on the market. An open house was scheduled for the following Saturday. She was a guest in what she had considered her domain. She had 2 weeks to remove her personal property before the new owners took possession, as the house sold in just 6 days for $15,000 over the asking price to a young couple eager to move in. Third, the legal reality. Her first meeting with a high-priced divorce attorney cost her a $10,000 retainer, money she had to borrow from her parents. The lawyer reviewed the documents Stephanie had filed and delivered the grim news. "He has a very strong case, Eden," the man said, his office far more opulent than Stephanie's. "The house is his separate property. We can argue for a share of the appreciation, but he's already offered that. The $14,000 you spent on your trip will be counted against your share of the community assets. He's been meticulous. Frankly, you're in a very weak position." The dream of keeping the house and forcing Kingston out evaporated in the face of legal fact. Fourth, the car. The white BMW 3 Series was a lease, co-signed by Kingston. His lawyer sent a letter to BMW Financial Services and the dealership, stating that he would no longer be responsible for the $680 monthly payments. Since Eden's credit alone was not strong enough to support the lease, she was forced to turn the car in, incurring a $4,500 early termination penalty. She was suddenly without her status symbol, forced to drive her mother's 10-year-old Honda Civic. Fifth, her professional standing. The stress and chaos of her personal life began to bleed into her work. She missed appointments. She failed to return client calls. Her reputation as a sharp, focused agent began to tarnish. The story of her lavish European trip, followed by a sudden, brutal divorce, became gossip within the tight-knit Spokane real estate community. She was no longer seen as an aspirational figure, but as a cautionary tale. Her commissions dwindled. The final tally of her losses was devastating. She received a settlement check for $65,000, representing her half of the home's appreciated value and half of the remaining liquid assets, minus the $84,000 she had spent on her trip. After paying her $15,000 in legal fees and the $4,500 car penalty, she was left with just over $45,000. It was a substantial amount of money, but a pittance compared to the life she had envisioned. She used it as a down payment on a small, $280,000 condo in a less desirable neighborhood. She had traded a paid-for home for a 30-year mortgage. She had traded a partner who provided stability for a profound and terrifying instability. She had, in the end, gotten exactly what she'd unknowingly asked for, a life that was entirely her own, with all the consequences that entailed. A year later, the autumn sun slanted through the large windows of the water reclamation facility's control room, illuminating the complex array of screens and monitors that Kingston oversaw. The light caught the deep, luminous brown of his skin as he pointed to a diagram on the wall. "And this," he said, his voice calm and clear, "is where the secondary treatment process begins. We introduce microorganisms, good bacteria, that consume the organic waste. It's nature's own cleaning crew." A small group of high school students on a tour listened, their expressions a mixture of fascination and slight disgust. Since his divorce, Kingston had volunteered to run Saturday morning plant tours for local schools. He discovered he had a knack for it, a passion for explaining the complex hidden systems that kept their city running. He found a quiet satisfaction in making the invisible visible, in showing these kids the profound, unglamorous work that made modern life possible. It was a purpose he had found in the wake of his old life's collapse. His own life had found a new, steady equilibrium. The sale of the house had netted him over $250,000 in tax-free equity. He had used a portion of it to buy a modest two-bedroom condo not far from his apartment, paying cash. It was his free and clear. There was no mortgage, no debt. The remaining money was invested, quietly growing. His $64,000 salary, once stretched thin to support a lifestyle he never wanted, was now more than enough. He lived simply. His joy came not from expensive things, but from quiet moments. On Sundays, he walked. He'd drive his paid-off Camry to Riverfront Park, the site of the 1974 World's Fair, and walk along the Spokane River. He'd watch the water rush over the rocks, a powerful, constant force. He'd buy a coffee from a local vendor for $3 and sit on a bench watching families play. He was a man at peace, his features softer. The tension that had lived in his shoulders for years finally gone. One crisp October afternoon, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, he saw her. Eden was walking on the other side of the river, near the carousel. She looked different. Her hair was simpler, pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a simple jacket, not the designer clothes he remembered. She was with a man he didn't recognize. She laughed at something the man said, and for a moment Kingston felt a phantom pang of memory, but it passed as quickly as it came. He didn't feel anger or resentment. He felt a quiet, profound sense of detachment. Their paths had diverged so completely that she was now just a stranger on the other side of a river. He forgave her, not for her sake, but for his. Forgiveness was the final step in his own treatment process, the final purification of his spirit. He had to release the last of the bitterness to be truly free. He stood up and continued his walk as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turning a brilliant shade of orange and purple. He realized that true wealth isn't about the things you can buy, but about the peace you can't sell. It's the quiet dignity of a job well done, the security of a home you own, and the freedom to walk your own path without asking for permission. It's having a say in your own life, not because you demand it, but because you've built it piece by steady, honorable piece. Every single one of us deserves a partner who respects our contributions and honors our shared dreams. Have you ever had to walk away from a situation where you felt unheard? Share your story in the comments below because your voice matters, and your journey can inspire someone else to find their own peaceful path forward.